Hello, Math 7 students. This is Mrs. Strickler here. I hope that you had a great Easter break and got to rest and enjoy your family. Maybe go outside a bit and get some fresh air. We certainly had a great time, and it was great to celebrate Easter yesterday. But now it's Monday, so we're going to get back to work. So today we're only going to do one lesson. We're going to do lesson 9.2. And so let's start with a prayer. Father in heaven, we just thank you for this day. I just pray for all my students that you would help them to get back in the groove, to learn this lesson very well, to pay attention so they can do excellently on their Chapter 9 test. And I pray that you would strengthen me and help me to be the very best teacher I can be. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so like I said, we're only going to do one lesson, 9.2. If we were in class, we would also be doing a fun activity with M&Ms. So I hope you had a chance to buy some over the weekend. It will be a separate activity. It's not required, but it's a lot of fun for learning percents. So if you haven't gotten them, maybe you can get them today or tomorrow. It's a great real-world example for how to use decimals and percents in our lives. So anyway, we're going to learn the math first. So I'm going to sit down now and put my overhead on so that we can take some notes. So this is lesson 9.2. I trust you have a piece of paper and a pencil ready to get started. Now the first thing we want to talk about, this has to do with percents. The whole chapter 9 is about percents. But we need to know how to do some word problems and know what certain words mean. So when we see the word of in a math lesson like this, in a math problem, that means multiply. Okay? And when we see the word is, that means equal to. I didn't want to write 2 equals like I did here. We'll make this an arrow. So if you see the word of, we're going to know that means that we multiply. And if we see the word is, we know that that's where we put our equal sign. Okay, so here's number 1. What percent of 3 is 1? Okay, so this is actually a word problem. It's just a very short one. It's one question. But knowing percentages of things is a very important skill that you must know. It comes up a lot in all kinds of professions and in the world. So we're going to learn how to do this. Now when I have a sentence like this that has words, then I change it into a math sentence. I translate it from English into math. So when it says what percent, I don't know that. So when I don't know something, I use a letter or a variable. So I'm going to call it X. Obviously you know this, but I'm just saying for the sake of refreshing our minds and doing it in terms of percent. So when I don't know something, I write X. When I see the word percent, I'm going to use my percent sign. Now here is my word of that I just spoke of, and that's where I'm going to put multiply. And then 3 equals 1. So now I don't have words, I have math, and I can solve it. Okay, let's write down some steps at the same time. We already did the first step, which is to translate the math statement or the English statement sentence into math. That's the first step. Okay. Now, when I'm looking here at my problem, we're going to go, I'll do the next step in the equation, and then I'm going to write the steps down. So here, I want to get rid of this 3. I want to end up with x by itself. My goal is to get x by itself. So the next thing I'm going to do is, I have this multiplying by 3. So the opposite of that is to divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And 3 over 3 goes away, and I have just x% equals 1/3. So what did I do there? I solve for x%. So get x% alone. All right, I got rid of the 3. So now I'm here. All right, the next thing I do is I divide to get a decimal. So I'm going to take 1/3 and I'm going to change that into a division problem. So I put 3 on the outside and 1 on the inside under the house. Okay, so my denominator goes here on the outside, and the numerator goes on the inside of the house. Okay, now I'm going to erase that a little bit so it doesn't get in the way. And I'm changing to a decimal. So 3, I put my decimal up on top. 3 doesn't go into 1, but it goes into 10 3 times. Okay, and I have 1. Bring down the 0. Okay, so I know this is just going to continue on, right? It goes on forever. So I can just put a bar over that. So I end up now, I've got x% equals, and instead of writing 1/3, I'm going to write 0.33 with a line over my second 3. Okay, so what did I do for that step? What I did is I divided to get a decimal. And we already did this, changing fractions to decimals in a previous chapter. So we've done that before. We're always building. Okay, now I want to tell you what something means, and by writing it down as a step. The next thing I'm going to do is change the percent to dividing by 100. Okay? So I have this percent here, and what percent means is a number out of 100. So I'm taking away my symbol, and I'm going to divide by 100, because that's what a percent is actually doing. So now I have this equation. And let's just put down there as a note that percent, there's the dog. You would think there was a burglar coming in, but there just isn't. It's just my daughter. Anyway, you've seen it happen before. So anyway, percent means divide by 100. Okay? So here I have this. And I want to get x alone, so the last thing I'm going to do is multiply by 100 on both sides. Okay, so I'm going to multiply by 100, and all that does, these cancel. So I get x equals, and when I multiply by 100, all that does is move my decimal over 2 places. So now it's here. So I actually have 33, I can just write 33%. Okay? So the question is, let's go back to the top, what percent of 3 is 1? So what is 1/3 as a percent? It's 33%, and that's my answer. Now, we'll do another one like this, and we won't write down all the steps, but I will refer to them a lot, okay? So let's do another one, and again, if you're a little bit behind, go ahead and pause the video. I'll keep going, but you can pause or rewind however long or often as you need to. Okay, number 2 is what percent of 40 is 16? Okay, so that's our next question. What percent of 40 is 16? Now this will go a little faster, but I'm going to translate first from English into math. So I'm going to write X, because I don't know what it is. Percent of means multiply, 40, and is means equals. So there is my new math equation. Okay, so my goal is to solve, let's see, in step 2, solve for X percent. And I'm going to get the X percent alone. All right, so I want to get rid of this 40. I want just this right here to be by itself. Okay, so I'm going to divide by 40 on both sides. X percent equals 16 over 40. Okay, so I just did number 2. Number 3 says divide to get a decimal. So I'm going to rewrite my fraction as a division problem. The 40 is the denominator, and that goes on the outside, and I have 16 there. So I'm going to put a decimal and 2 zeros because I know I'm going to be going less than 1. So let's go ahead and divide this. I put my decimal on top, and 40 doesn't go into 16, but it does go into 160, and it goes in 4 times, and that's exact. So I end up with 0. So I have X percent equals, let's just put a 0 there too, because with percents I always want to have 2 decimal places. So I have divided to get a decimal. Now I'm going to change the percent to dividing by 100, right? So I take out my percent symbol here, and I put in dividing by 100. I still don't have X alone, so now what's the last thing I'm going to do? I'm going to multiply by 100 on both sides in order to get the X by itself, and that means I move my decimal places over 2 places, and I get 40%. So 16 is 40%, or 40% of 40. All right, I'm going to let you try a couple on your own. And here is these 2 problems. Number 1, what percent of 400 is 52? And number 2, I'm going to put a circle around these because I don't want to confuse what numbers are part of the problem and what numbers are the problem numbers. What percent of 80 is 15? Okay, so you can go ahead and pause the video, and we'll come back in just a few minutes. I'm going to keep going. Okay, we're back. I hope you tried those. I'm going to change colors. And let's see what we get. What percent of 400 is 52? So I'm going to write X. Oh, it didn't actually take. X percent times 400 is 52. Okay, I want to get X percent alone, so I'm going to divide by 400. And these cancel, so I get X percent equals 52 over 400. If you want to reduce that, you can, but it's not required. So I'm going to divide 400 into 52, and this ends up being 1, and I get 120 here. Bring down a 0. 400 goes into 1200 3 times. Okay, so I get 0.13. Let's keep our voices down, please. So my decimal is 0.13. So I'm going to change X percent to X over 100. Multiply by 100 on both sides, which moves my decimal over, so I get 13%. And that's my answer. All right, let's do the second one. What percent of 80 is 15? I'm going to divide by 80. And I have X percent equals 15 out of 80. Now I'm going to divide 80 into 15. 80 goes into 150 once. And I get 70. Bring down a 0. And it goes in 8 times. 8 times 80 is 640. And I get 60, and I'm going to extend my zeros here. Bring down another 0. 80 goes into 600 7 times. And I get 40. Bring down another 0, and I get 5. And that works out exactly. So I have X percent equals... Hang on a minute. I forgot to put it over. No, we're good. We're good. And I get 0.1875. Now I'm going to take my percent symbol out. Like that. Multiply by 100, and that moves my decimal over 2 places, and I get 18.75%. Okay, that's our first type of percent problems. Now we're going to do the second kind. So I'm going to change colors back to blue and keep going. Okay, so this is number 3. Now these are a little different, but you'll see as we go. Okay, so I want to show you a picture while I read a problem out loud. We have, right here, this. Okay, we have a girl surfing. Okay, so let me read you the problem out loud. In a survey, 525 teenagers were asked to name the water sport that they would most like to try learning. 20% said surfing. So the question is, how many teenagers said surfing? Okay, so now let's go back. With surfing, I don't know if surfing appeals to you. I like boogie boarding myself. I've done that a lot, and all my kids would be laughing at me. But we had a good time growing up. We would all body surf, boogie board. Did I say body surf? I meant boogie board together. Okay, so the question is, we have 525 teenagers, and 20% want to try surfing. And the question is, how many teenagers is that? Okay, so what is 20% of 525? Okay, so we kind of turn our problem into a sentence like we had in the first two. So what is, I don't know, when I don't know something, when I have what, I'm going to put X. So the first thing I do, let's write some steps. The first thing I do is translate into math. So I've got X equals 20% of 525. Okay, so here we have this. Now the second thing I'm going to do is this time the X is already by itself. But what I have to do is figure out what to do with those numbers there. So I want to change the percent to a decimal. And I do that by dividing by 100. So I'm going to take out the percent and I put in dividing by 100. So I have 20% here, and I'm going to take the percent out and change that to 20 over 100, and that becomes 0.20. That's pretty easy to see. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this equation here with 0.20 instead of 20 with the percent symbol. So now all I have to do is multiply 0.20 by 525, and the last thing I do is multiply. And I get 105. So 105, hey Rosie, teenagers want to try surfing. Okay, so let's do one more that's like this. Instead of having a word problem though, we're just going to translate it into math. Whoops. Okay, so what number is 76% of 25? Okay, this looks similar when we go here. What is 20% of 525? It's a similarly worded problem. What number is 76% of 25? I'm going to use the same three steps. So what number is X equals 76% multiplied by 25? So now I've translated from English into math. And now I want to change 76% to a fraction. So I take my percent out and put 76 over 100. And if I divide that, I get 0.76. So remember, step 2 was the change to a decimal by dividing by 100. Okay, so I have 0.76 times 25, and when I work that out, I get 19. So what number is 76% of 25? The answer is 19. Okay, I want you guys to go ahead and try two of them that are like this. Here's number one. Let's just do one. what number is 5% of 400? Okay, so go ahead and try that. You can pause the video and I'll start in just a moment. Okay, let's go over this together. I hope you had a chance to do it and it worked out all right. I'm going to change to orange again. Okay, what number, that's X, is 5% of 400? Okay, so I'm going to change 5% to 5 over 100, which is 0.05. So I've got X equals 0.05 times 400, and if I multiply that, I get 20. So your answer is 20. Okay, we have one more type of percent problem, and we're going to do 2 of those and our last OIOs, and then we'll be finished. So here's number 5. 42 is 30% of what number? Okay, so basically the words are all put in different order, or they're asking a little bit of a different thing. Usually they want to know what is the percentage, or what is the total, or one of the numbers. Basically all the questions are the same, except the words are just put in a different order, and they are either asking for one of the numbers or the percent. Okay, so let's convert this. So I'm going to change to math. So I have 42 is 30% of, and when I don't know something, I use X. So the first thing I do is translate. The second thing I do is change percent to a decimal. So 30% becomes 30 over 100. I'm going to make that a little bigger, which is 0.30. So now I'm going to take this and put that in there. So I have 42 equals 0.30 times X. And now, how do I get X by itself? I divide by 0.30. Okay, now we did this in our decimal chapter. So 0.3 is going to go on the outside, and it looks like that. So I put my denominator over here on the outside of the division house, and 42 goes inside. Okay, when I have a decimal on the outside here, I have to move it over. I can't keep that decimal there with the divisor, and I can do that. I can change that as long as I do that to the number inside. I hope you remember that. So the first thing I do when I have a decimal on the outside of my division problem is I move it so it's not really there anymore. So now 30 goes into 42 once. So then I have 12. Bring down the 0. 30 goes into 120 4 times. Okay, we're done. We're done. There's nothing left, and I have no numbers here, so I have to put a 0 here to hold this place. So X is 140. And that makes sense if you go back and look at it. 42 is 30% of what? Well, 30% is about whatever your number is, you need to multiply it by about 3 to get the whole thing. So if I take 42 roughly and I multiply it by 3, that's somewhere around 140. So I know that I'm on the right track. That makes sense. Okay, one more. 14 is 56% of what number? Okay. Oh, I didn't write my last step up here. Let's do that too. Divide or get x alone. Solve for x. There we go. So we have 3 steps. Translate, change the percent to a decimal, and solve for x. Okay. So I'm going to translate times x. And now I'm going to change 56% to 56 over 100, which is 0.56. So now I have 0.56 times x. I want to get x alone, so I'm going to divide by 0.56. These cancel. Now I need to do my long division here. So I'm going to move my decimal over 2, like that. 56 goes into 140, I guess, twice. So I'm going to put a 2 there. 2 times 6 is 12. Carry the 1. I get 112. When I subtract, I get 28, and I bring down the 0. How many times does 56 goes into 280? Well, 5 times 5 is 25, so let's try that. 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 5 is 25 plus 3, that works out. Great. Okay, so x is 25. All right, I want you guys to try one. And that will be our last problem. 60 is 25% of what number? Okay, go ahead and work on that one. And pause the video. All right, we're back. Let's do this. So 60 equals 25% times x. And I'm going to change 25% to 25 over 100, which is 0.25. So now I have 60 equals 0.25 times x. Divide by 0.25. And remember, 0.25 goes right there. And when I work that out, let's see, I get 2, bring down the 0,